A very good evening to our Vice Chancellor, Dr. Rakesh Kumar Mudgal, sir. Thank
Good
you so much,
evening,
sir.
good evening, all of you.
So we'll be shortly starting with the session, sir. We are just waiting for more participants to join in.
No, because yesterday I missed the session, that is why I joined a bit early, so that I should not be
Yes.
missing the session
Thank
today.
you
Right?
so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Some technical issue, I could not join yesterday's session. So I thought, let me not take chance of similar nature, right? That is why I
Thank
thought
you so much.
that we gain time. That is
Yes,
why
sir.
I rushed from the office and reached home. Yeah. So this is 6 o'clock. Sorry. Yeah.
Good evening, sir.
Good
Welcome,
evening.
sir.
Good evening, ma'am. Good evening.
Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning to one and all. We are beginning our seminar for today. I, Frederick Fernandez, and my colleague Padmapriya, members of Students Wing of Bioethics Unit, are glad to have you all back for the second day session of International Seminar on Cooperation, Concept of Human Disorder, Responding to Today's Needs. On behalf of the Students Wing of Bioethics Unit, I welcome our Vice Chancellor, Professor Rakesh Kumar Mudgal, Pro Vice Chancellor, Dr. Sharma, Dean, Bhai Patil Medical College, Dr. Rakesh Sharma, our guest speakers, Dr. Avinash D'Souza and Dr. Devrat Harshe, Dr. Russell D'Souza, Dr. Mary Matthews, Dr. Derek D'Souza, Dr. Praveen Arora. I also welcome all the doctors and faculties from all the medical, paramedical, and psychology universities, all the Bioethics Wing Steering Committee and Student Advisory Committee members, Bioethics Students Wing Kolhapur, and last but not least, to all attendees from India and abroad, a big welcome to you all. Now we'll request Vice Chancellor and Lead Chair, Professor Rakesh Kumar Mudgal, sir, to address the seminar. So I'll request to please on your mic, sir.
Good evening, all. It is really a privilege and a matter of pleasure that we will be learning something so great in today's session. Of course, I'm so sorry I missed the yesterday's session because of some technical issue in connecting with the webinar. Nevertheless, it is a very, very important topic because for a healthy living as well as making a living, ethics are very, very important, and its importance cannot be undermined in any fashion. because they say the quality of mind is the quality of life we live. And but controlling mind is the most difficult thing, because it could be either our greatest ally or it could be a worst adversary for us. Most of the things in life are about how we behave, and behavior can be exhibited by two prime what you call characteristics or actions, either by saying or by doing. Right? Hope I'm audible to all.
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Fine, fine. Right. But from teaching perspective, it is very hard to teach people behavior. And here the role of ethics comes into picture. Ethics is more of a normative type of things. And believe me, anything which is forced is never forceful. And we want to create something which is forceful in nature. And that is why ethics are getting much more importance in today's world. As I said, it is very difficult to really train people in behavior. Despite of really smart people, they cannot be trained onto this, and that puts a great challenge onto the educational institution. Owing to this challenge to train people in good behavior, ethics have gained great importance and relevance in all walks of life, be it personal, be it professional, public, and even in the private life also. Because people have to understand there are different type of ethical standards which are warranted in every segment or every character or every category of life. One is the personal life, another is the private life, professional life, and public life. And professional and public life are greatly focused today because we are training professionals for public, right? There is a strong acknowledgement and belief that education has a valued link with employability and ownership, but its linkages with ethics have not been equally treasured and reaped as of now. And that is why there has been a growing demand for training people on ethical behavior. We all know ethics is a philosophical discipline pertaining to notions of good and bad, right and wrong, fair and foul, just and unjust, action. Ultimately, it is as a guiding and defining our moral life in the communities we live. Ethics, as you all know, it is application of ethics to field of medicine and healthcare, which is gaining prominence with each passing day. Some of the pertinent questions each one of us who is associated with medical profession, primarily of what we call providing healthcare services, either of preventive in nature, curative in nature, or promotive in nature or rehabilitative aspects of healthcare. We keep on bombarded with such questions. We have to ask ourselves also, and we need to answer that. What is the right thing to do at this point of time? What is the good way of going? Because we have to identify the right approach, and we have to move in that right approach to be considered as worthwhile professionals or human beings contributing into the healthcare delivery system, right? What is our obligation? Because there is a combination of three, and Indian philosophy, three are very, very important. Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, or somebody who's a creator, somebody who's operating, or somebody who's a disposal management. Same is Satyam Shivam Sundaram. Here also, things are packaged as such: responsibility, authority, and accountability. When it comes to accountability, ethics, they play a very, very big role. If I'm able to answer myself that, am I accountable? What is my obligation? To whom? To what extent? Are we under obligation to help each other? What is my commitment and what my responsibility is? Because as I said, ethics are normative in nature. They provide only norms of good behavior. Despite of the fact that we might indulge into any behavior or activity which is not ethical, but we expect that people should behave ethically with us. Even a thief does not like that he should be robbed of something. But how I'm imbibing those characteristics, whether in a medical field, in a personal life, professional life, as I said earlier, private life, as well as public life. Though focus has shifted to more on the professional life because it is being taken as one of the imperative and essential to really contribute to the highest degree of precision. Another thing which we keep on asking, who is responsible for this thing, and to whom and for what extent? What is the befitting response we have to make under given situations? Believe me, ethics play a very, very important role, both in making a dignified living as well as making life meaningful. Remember, we can face the future in two specific ways. One is in anticipation, another may be in apprehension. But if we are trained ourselves, or we are creating an environment which breeds ethical standard thinking and action, we will be able to lead life and meet our future with more of a anticipation than apprehensions. With right ethical standard and practicing them with commitment will certainly help in shaping the destiny of individuals, professions, communities, and the nations as well. I'll just give a simple equation, which being a person from more from a mathematics than a biology, there's a simple equation: the ethics is equal to or approaching equal to value and knowledge. If somebody is not valuing something, despite of having huge amount of knowledge at his or her command, he will not be able to exhibit ethical standards of behavior or living. If somebody is having a what you call valuing something but is not able to acquire the appropriate and supporting knowledge, then also there is a possibility of leading a what you call a suboptimal life as far as ethical standards are concerned. E is equal to V plus A, means ethics is equal to value plus knowledge, and value is something what we value, and knowledge is basically understanding of the facts, figures in a particular fashion and creating a competency to apply, converting that into wisdom. Not taking much time, let me congratulate each one of you for really shown a great enthusiasm and inclination in joining this webinar. That is going to definitely make us richer in understanding and application. My congratulations to the organizers for taking this particular seminar to such a height that a lot of people are participating, not from the country, but beyond the geographical locations, continents and cultures. With these words, I extend what we call a warm welcome to each participant and my firm belief that we'll be richer at the end of the day. And sorry for not able to join because of technical glitch at the last moment yesterday, but I'll try to compensate that loss today. Right. With these words, my best wishes to all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for your kind words. Today, we will be having a panel discussion on post-traumatic embitterment disorder. Before we begin, I will request you all to kindly switch off your mics. If anyone has any questions, you are requested to drop it in the chat box. And by the end of the seminar, we will be sending feedback forms on the chat box as well as WhatsApp groups. So you are kindly requested to please fill it up. Thank you. Now I will request my colleague Padma Priya to introduce our speakers for the day.
Thank you, Frederick. I'd like to now introduce our speakers for today. Dr. Avinash D'Souza, consultant psychiatrist and psychotherapist, consultant school psychiatrist, founder trustee of D'Souza Foundation, a trust that works in area of mental health awareness across all sectors, associate professor and secretary of International Institute of Organizational Psychological Medicine, chief editor of the Indian Journal of Mental Health. Welcome, sir. And next we have Dr. Devrat Harshe, assistant professor, Department of Psychiatry, D.Y. Patil Medical College, Kolhapur. He's also consultant psychiatrist in Dhanvantri Nursing Home and Dhanvantri Mind Care, Kolhapur. He's also an assistant editor for Archive of Indian Psychiatry. Thank you for gracing us with your presence, esteemed speakers. Now, before we start with the panel discussion, I'd like to request our speakers to give a quick recap on PTAD for our audience. Thank you. First, I'd like to call Dr. Avinash D'Souza, sir.
Okay, now am I audible?
Yes, sir.
What's very important to understand before we go to PTAD is the entire concept of embitterment. And it's a concept which isn't new to psychiatry or the world. It has been mentioned in ancient textbooks, it has been mentioned in ancient literature, but the concept came back by a psychologist termed Linden, who conducted research on people who were anguished, upset, hurt, angry after the Berlin Wall fell. And so the first research done on embitterment was in Germany in recent times. It's basically a distinct state of mood and a state of mood where you feel anger, you feel resentment, you feel negative, you feel disappointment, you feel humiliation, and you feel your basic values have been violated. So it has evolved from just embitterment to depression with embitterment, post-traumatic embitterment, along with the need for even psychiatric and psychological intervention. And there are many situations where a person may experience anger, hostility, guilt, shame, bitterness in life, bitterness in love and relationships, both personal and even at the workplace, this could happen. And very often one may feel unappreciated at the workplace. And that is when embitterment comes in. And it's caused by an event. It may be caused by a single event. It may be caused by a series of events that leads to a trigger of events that then makes the person feel embittered. And it's very important to understand that it's a continuous state. It's a progressive state. It does not abate very easily in therapy. It does not very easily abate to even medical intervention. So we don't have a psychiatric drug to treat embitterment. You need therapy for it. And it's also many a times a part of an emotional contagion. What we mean by this is that if one person is embittered, very often the other begins to empathize with him. And then you will have a group of people who get, embittered at the workplace. And embitterment happens in relationships after a breakup, after a divorce, after a separation. You may feel upset. It can also happen that you feel cheated. It can also happen that you feel there's injustice. It can happen that you feel angry. You may get flashbacks of the past that irritate you. And some people have a tendency to feel more embittered than others because they have a genetic emotional sensitivity in general. And these are people who are more sensitive to criticism. They are more sensitive to get hurt. And they tend to feel that they've been a victim all their life. So this intrusive aspect of embitterment is something which, we need to probably treat and manage, which is something which is very important. And also embitterment leads to repetitive thoughts. So you begin to ruminate, you begin to think. And a lot of people who are unable to express their emotions very well may tend to feel embittered. Embitterment can also happen in cancer. It can also happen in various conditions. And that's when the construct of PTED or post-traumatic embitterment disorder has come in, wherein apart from the PTSD symptoms being present, the person would see himself as a victim. He would blame himself for an event for having not prevented it, or rather having caused the event and not being able to cope with it. He may also have memories of the event that come time and again. And he also doesn't understand, what is needed for those wounds to heal. And there are negative events in life that has happened. So this together makes up the entire concept of what is called positive post-traumatic embitterment disorder, where he may have workplace issues, energies poor, there may be procrastination, there may be a lot of emotional modulation, and the duration has to be around 3 months. That's the criteria for you to diagnose post-traumatic embitterment disorder. And we are seeing a lot of it in the context of COVID-19 also. The fact that you see a loss of a loved one, you grieve for a loved one. Many people have lost their jobs. Many people have been laid off. Many people have been had to change their profession. There have been family disruptions. So multiple things have happened. So I think that's all I would like to start with to explain the concept of PTED. And I think I'll hand over to Devavrat. I'm seeing Devavrat online after nearly a year and a half, I think. And Devavrat is, of course, a brilliant psychiatrist. He's been a very close colleague and researcher who has worked with me on many projects. So over to you, Devavrat.
Thank you, sir. Am I audible clearly here?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So Avinash sir has very lucidly explained about embitterment. What I would like to add onto that in one line is, it is a three-pronged state. Okay, so there are three very important components of embitterment which differentiate it from anger. Okay, so one is, yes, there is anger inbuilt in it. Second is, there is a strong wish to undo what has happened. Okay, so if you have seen, I think there's a movie from Amir Khan called Talash, where his son dies in a lake and he spends a lot of time wondering what he's angry about. He gets angry on himself and he keeps thinking, what would have happened if I had done this, I had done that. So there's a very strong wish to undo what has happened. Secondly, there is a very strong urge to reinstate justice. Okay. So the person who is in embitterment feels that he is experiencing injustice and he wants justice done on himself, which he thinks is justice. And most important thing, which, you know, highlights the need for this discussion is there is a very innate urge to get revenge. Okay. So this is what embitterment means, that there is a urge to get revenge or get even. And that is why discussing about this makes more sense, because everyone must be thinking here these two people are talking about anger or frustration, which all of us feel almost every day. But these three things, that is strong wish to undo, justice, and most importantly, revenge or get even, is something which distinguishes it apart from our day-to-day anger or frustration. One more thing, there are many points which I want to discuss about this, but I will discuss it in the treatment section. Sir, I will hand back to Dr. D'Souza if he wants to add something about the clinical presentation.
I think we've given a good enough introduction. So if you know there are questions that the panel would
Yes,
like,
we'll go ahead with the
We'll
questions.
begin with the panel discussion with the questions.
So the first question is that where does PTED fit among other mental disorders? So there's still a confusion about it. So can you please elaborate on it?
Okay, so PTED is a very, very specific condition. It's something like this, that people who look at PTED will feel, the person has every right to feel this way because of, what he's undergone. So you would want to really think before you want to call it a psychiatric disorder per se. So for example, if say someone we say has gone through a trauma of rape and feels upset, hurt, so we think it's very normal. I mean, anyone who would have gone through that would have felt this way. So similarly, PTED has parts of it which come under the depressive group, parts of it which come under the anxiety group of disorders, parts of which would come under the post-traumatic group of disorders. So it really doesn't fit into one box when we look at psychiatric conditions. So it basically is a group or a multiplicity of psychiatric conditions that are all interwoven into one. So I think it's a separate, unique condition on its own. Though if you, for all intents, I think post-traumatic embitterment disorder would come under the post-traumatic group if we had to put it there.
Okay.
So what will you like to add on, like which personality groups are more prone to this PTED?
Well, I think people who are more emotionally sensitive, people who are more affectively inhibited, meaning they don't express their emotions well, people who are from a young age have had trauma again, time and again. And I think people who basically feel hurt very easily are the ones who are going to be more prone.
Okay. So here we have an ethical question, is that why haven't the DSM and ICD included PTED yet and given it the due recognition that it needs?
I think Devavrat could take that. Yeah.
Okay. See, DSM and ICD are not clinical textbooks. They are statistical manuals. So they work from the data and information and scientific consensus as it builds across the globe. Okay. Secondly, to call something or anything a disease or disorder in any branch, not only in psychiatry, but across medical science, it has to fit two very important criteria. One is therapeutic disadvantage. One is biological disadvantage, and second is therapeutic necessity or therapeutic concern. So biological disadvantage means what that particular condition has caused you to lose as a human being. So what aspect of your biology are you losing because of that particular condition? And secondly is therapeutic concern. That is, why is it necessary to treat that particular event or condition or let's say manifestation. Okay, so the things which we have discussed so far, it fits into the criteria of biological disadvantage. That is, the person who is feeling embittered, has a lot of problems, behavioral problems and so on, and loses a lot of value, life value and quality of life. The only problem comes is it doesn't fit the bill for the therapeutic disadvantage concern, because many times the person who is experiencing embitterment doesn't realize that he or she requires treatment, because embitterment becomes a part of their life. It becomes a coping mechanism. So for people with embitterment to present with their problems and seek treatment is something that rarely happens. And therefore, to call it a disorder or disease, it doesn't fit the key criteria of therapeutic disadvantage. So that is the reason so far DSM and ICD have not included it in its criteria. Another reason is, if you see what PTSD is, post-traumatic stress disorder, there is a uniform criteria that it usually starts after a very, very severe life-threatening or life-altering event, such as rape or a murder attempt or a car accident, or for example, something what happened in Uttarakhand yesterday, giant flood or landslides. But what happens in PTSD is the event might be very normal or very minimal. For example, me scolding a student in class, or me telling my resident that he has not done his job well, can lead to embitterment in that resident's mind. Now, this event is very minor, normal, and occurs in day-to-day life. And therefore, in PTSD, the event is not important, but how that person looks at that event is important. And therefore, there is no uniform way to say which event will lead to PTE and which event will not. And therefore, right now, DSM and ICD have not included this term into its criteria or as a separate diagnostic heading.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, we'll have one more question. Like, will even PTD involve labeling of people like other mental disorders? Or
okay, I didn't get your question. Can you just repeat?
Sir, like other mental disorders, there is a labeling of people. So you will even PTD involve labeling of people?
See, if, for example, you talked about other mental disorders, so if someone has a particular illness, then calling it labeling will be wrong. But since right now PT is not a diagnostic heading included anywhere, so right now question of labeling doesn't.
Okay, thank you, sir. So moving on to the next question. I would like to say how would family and friends recognize the signs and symptoms of PTSD?
Well, I think the person would feel angry, hurt, betrayed, cheated. He would have symptoms of dysphoria, feeling sad, aggression. He may represent a patient with depression. He may have appetite issues, sleep disturbances, multiple aches and pains. He may also not be happy to go to work. Energy levels and motivation will be low. Emotions may not be experienced. He may have problems with colleagues at the workplace. He may have problems with family members. He may experience dreams related to the event. He may feel anxious when he thinks about the event or talks about the event. He may emotionally feel numb. He may also get a little paranoid and not trust others. So there are multiple things that come under the PTSD symptomatology.
So what are these levels of symptoms, and at what point should medical intervention be required?
See, I think if the symptoms remain for more than 2 months or 3 months and are, not resolving with any help, then one would need medical intervention. That would be my take.
So like, can you add something on PTSD scale?
How do we measure it?
See, PTSD scale is a scale which was developed by Linden, and the whole aim of the scale was that there have been only 2 scales so far which have been developed for PTSD. One is a PTSD self-rating scale, and I think there's one which was a PTSD scale developed by Linden. So there were only 2 primarily. It has 19 items, and they are it's a Likert type scale. And it has been used in most studies done on PTSD. So it has good validity and reliability. So that's how I think that's it. Those are what I would say are the rating scales for PTSD.
Devraj sir, like what would you like to add on like early or delayed or severe symptoms or some behavioral changes or speech changes in
How does the family recognize this?
See, for embitterment, there are three key things that a family should, or anyone for that matter, not only family, but friends or even colleagues, neighbors, you know, that one thing, I mean, this is something that even you might have observed people around you, your friends, family, neighbors, colleagues, peers even, right? One is, if suppose anyone who is carrying an embitterment about a personal event, the first thing that would be is withdrawal. For example, if I'm taking a clinic and you come in late and I scold you in front of everyone, then you will carry that anger and embitterment towards me. And every time we cross our paths in the college every day, the first thing you will do is you will either avert your gaze or you will change your path, or you will make as much efforts as you can to avoid either me or your sight of me, right? So the first thing that person will do is withdrawal. I mean withdrawal as in withdraw from that particular event or stimulus or that let's say situation. Secondly, as I said, embitterment becomes a part of life and it becomes a coping mechanism. So people will be, or the person who is experiencing it will be resistant to change. Okay, for example, to convince them that what the person is doing is out of embitterment and not his usual self will be a very big challenge. For example, think about it. If you had a very bad viva, the next time, even if someone tells you to present the case in front of a class, you will not agree, even if you are a good student or an above average student or a good speaker as well. So withdrawal, resistant to change, and anhedonistic behavior. That is a person who will not be able to enjoy most things related to that particular event or life. For example, someone has a very bad boss, or someone has problems in workplace or at home, then that person will be in that environment. He has to be home somewhere, right? But he or she will not be able to enjoy, that is hedonism, into that environment. So these three things, withdrawal, resistance to change, and hedonism, that is ability to enjoy things or have fun, for that in simpler terms, will be the three things to watch for the family, friends, colleagues, neighbors, or teachers even.
Sir, ethically speaking, we have a question in this section, like the medical curriculum does not include PTD either. So is it fair, like, or wouldn't that lead to misdiagnosis or something?
See, right now, it is not a clinical entity. So, and when you say medical, I'm assuming MBBS. So
yes, sir.
Dedicating a separate, time slot to discuss this particular thing as a clinical entity is not warranted. But I will tell you something. As part of communication skills module, I think it is vital, and the MCI has included sessions on communication skills, effective communication, into the foundation course for MBBS students. And embitterment is something which, if it is detected early, may not require a therapist or psychiatrist or psychologist at all. Even friends, family can offer primary care intervention with effective communication skills. I mean, if we later have time, we can discuss it in a bit detail.
Okay, thank you, sir. So now moving on to the next question about the progression of PTD. So can you please tell us about the duration and the triggers of the disorder?
See, I think there are multiple triggers. So there could be divorce, marriage, separation, loss of a job, loss of a spouse, multiple factors that lead to this. What's very important is that the duration is generally remains for around 1 to 4 months, 5 months, and then it goes off. Sometimes it may remain for years, sometimes it may take a long time. And I basically feel that when one has been through trauma, probably they need time to heal, and each one heals individually. So embitterment also takes its own time to heal. You can't push the healing. But what's very important is that you have to see that the trauma is not repetitive. So repetitive trauma is always going to have a bigger chance of causing damage, and repetitive trauma will also not allow the individual to heal as fast. So one has to keep him away from that kind of trauma.
Okay.
So what do you like to say about the intervention? How is the intervention of this in case like a social support or spontaneous? is the intervention on social support basis or counseling, or is it spontaneous?
How can we help? Like,
the intervention is primarily psychological, though we do have some medical help which we offer. Psychotherapy has to use the principles of preventive psychiatry, using building resilience, improving the human capital so that you deal with embitterment. What's also very important is that you need to, there are therapies, some people talk about cognitive behavior therapy being used. Some people talk about something called wisdom and competence theory being used. So that is a form of therapy that is also sort of used. There are a lot of people who talk about using trauma-based therapy, where a normal emotion has to be analyzed. The predisposition to certain emotions have to be analyzed. A cognitive pattern of thinking has to be analyzed. It's not only the individual, even the family may need help. So the main treatment is psychotherapeutic, while we do have medications and other things that can be used in certain groups of people.
yes,
I would
sir.
like to
So
add
please
this
add.
one
Yes,
point.
Devavrat, please add. Yeah.
See, as I said, I mean, I saw a question by Dr. Praveen Arora in the chat box about the same thing, about intervention. If it is detected early, even, I mean, anyone, just like anyone can offer BLS, right? So similarly, anyone can offer some intervention if embitterment is detected early. So what is the key principle in offering psychotherapy embitterment is, we need to convince the person, or let's say not convince, but we need to make sure that the person understands that what he's experiencing is not because of the event, but because how he has seen that event. Are you getting the point? Okay. For example, I will give you just one example. If our friend tells us that I just had a breakup, okay, which is the first thing everyone tells that person? Tell me honestly. Everyone will say that, I don't worry, he or she was not good enough for you. Right? This is what everyone does, and all of us have done that. Even I have done that to my friends. Right? So when we tell this, that he or she was not good enough for you, that person will maybe feel validated and might feel fine about the breakup, but he or she will not be able to accept the fact that maybe there was something wrong with him which has led to the breakup. So the intervention for embitterment involves one key principle, that is, you need to make the person aware that whatever he's experiencing may not be because of the event. Because as I said, event may be normal. You are coming late to my clinic, I have the right to reprimand you, right? I have the right to ask you why you are late. So event may be completely normal and occurring in day-to-day life. So the person needs to understand that what he's experiencing is not because of the event, but because how he has seen the event or how he has interpreted the event. So that is the key matter for embitterment. I mean, therapy for embitterment.
Thank you, sir. So does PTED evolve into any actual psychological or mental disorders, psychiatric disorders? Like, is it accompanied by any other disorders?
Well, I think you see PTED with depression, you see PTED with the anxiety group of disorders, you see PTED with post-traumatic stress disorder, you see PTED with even OCD at times. So it's not that, it's not seen, it is seen with many other psychiatric disorders.
So about the PTSD thing, there was a question in the chat box. How do we differentiate PTED from PTSD? Please.
Okay. Now, what is very important is that they are two distinct conditions, though they are interlinked and combined. So PTED applies to experiencing, witnessing, or being confronted by an event which is traumatic. That is in PTED, but it's not life-threatening. It could be an everyday event. PTSD generally is a life-threatening event. So PT, like say rape, a road accident, a natural disaster would lead to PTSD. But in PTED, it would be divorce, a loss of somebody, serious illness, disability, loss of a job, workplace stress, domestic violence, our relationships. So embitterment is different, whereas post-traumatic stress is different. And subtle feelings of bitterness come with sort of frustration about living. which is very common in PTED. But in PTSD, it's more about a fear. There's a more of an anxiety component. You get numb, you don't want to talk about the event. So that is something which differentiates the two.
Thank you, sir.
Devrat sir, anything you would like to add on?
About the differentiating between PTSD and
Yes, sir.
yeah, I would just highlight the fact that the only difference is in PTSD, it is about the event. In PTED, it is not about the event, it is about the person and how he has seen that event.
Thank you, sir. So now as we are speaking, we are amidst a pandemic. So can we please talk about the prevalence of PTD during the COVID-19 pandemic? How has it affected people? And let's talk about the vulnerable groups first and how do we protect them?
Okay, I think what is important to know here is that PTED has come up in the pandemic because people have lost a loved one and have not been able to be there for the final rites of the loved one many a times. It's also come in because of a lot of guilt, shame, stigma associated with even getting COVID and the way people react to it. PTED has come in because jobs have been lost due to the pandemic. PTED has come in because marriages are broken due to the pandemic and the lockdown, and the couple not being able to tolerate each other. So a lot of divorce has come up post the pandemic. And I think the vulnerable groups are doctors, medical students, nurses, the common man, young people, older people. So that's what I would say. And I think Devavrat could add anything if he wants.
One more group that experienced a lot of PTED during COVID times was those people who were put in, survey wards or screening wards when they had no symptoms, but they just came in contact with someone who was COVID positive. And there was no explanation that we could offer to them other than the fact that it's a governmental order. And boss, you have to stay here till for next 14 days till your COVID report comes back negative. So if you remember those 4 criteria which Sir talked about, humiliation, victimization, unfairness, unjustness, it was sort of unjust that, catching people and putting them in wards or shelter homes or government facilities for 14 days with no reason. And how it led to embitterment was when people actually needed to do COVID test for, surgeries which were scheduled or planned surgeries, cataract operations. People simply said that no, we don't want to do any of those treatments or surgeries, but we are not going to do a COVID test because we have had that particular experience, in whatever hospitals, wards, or wherever. So even without patients, people who experienced this also had a lot of, let's say, embitterment towards this entire, system of screening. It was necessary. Again, as I told, the event was not wrong. It was necessary at that time, but people saw it as something, unjust being done to them and reacted in a bitter manner. Even today, some people are not ready to take vaccines, might be because of that, right? So this is one group which, all of us medical practitioners are seeing these patients who are still not willing to do a COVID test for some reason.
So, sir, besides the medical professionals and the COVID affected people, also the daily lives of normal people like adolescents or women undergoing pregnancy, old age people, their lives have also been abruptly affected. So how do you suggest that, how can we help them? How can you protect them? Any points in that?
From bitterment?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
How
like who is more prone to it? Like among these groups, who is more prone to it? Like,
see, everyone is prone. What we should be worried about is proneness about, proneness, not about proneness for getting it, but about proneness for, what sort of reaction that that person might take. For example, think of someone who is a, very ideal student, average student, ideal citizen, and someone who is a, a professional criminal. If both of them get bitterment, one of them might react, in a very benign way. The other might react in a very harsh or unthinkable manner. So really, anyone can get bitterment. For think about it. Even if you see the list, the example which I gave about COVID vaccination, even some doctors are not willing to take COVID vaccinations, or not willing for mixing in other people or avoiding work. I have seen many doctors who have stopped their practice because of possibly getting infected or having to go through all that procedure, right? So anyone can get affected. So as I said, if you want to protect people against bitterment or from getting or developing bitterment, you need to remember just one thing. It is not about the event. It is about how you are seeing the event. And what Avinash sir said about, wisdom and cognitive therapy, that there is one thing, there is one component in that, and that is about acceptance and factual knowledge, where the aim is to distract focus from what is lost to what is still in store, right? I mean, so that should be the aim. And again, so the making person aware that whatever reaction or whatever consequences we are facing is may not be because of the event, but because of how we are seeing the event. So this is something which everyone can remember as a, one-line summary of.
Okay.
Sir, in case of like COVID impacted people, there are some COVID positive, COVID carriers, COVID affected families, healthcare workers. How can the medical professional help them? Like in counseling or some peer support, anything like that?
I think Devavrat, just go. You can answer. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, sir. See, first thing is, I mean, you're talking about people who have developed embitterment or protect people from developing embitterment.
So some people have the PTD and their families who are COVID affected.
Yes.
So in that case, how can the medical professionals help them in case of peer support or counseling or anything like that?
Okay. See, it's a stepwise process, but it's pretty easy if you go about it. First is, I'll just give an example of the simulation lab which we run in the hospital. The first thing we do in those sessions is ask participants about how their experience was and what exact feelings they had at the end of their simulation session. So the first thing when we talk about, talk with someone with potential embitterment person is to, give a venting outlet for their emotional responses. Because see, what happens is when our thinking is clouded by emotions, we often take wrong decisions. When we are angry, we lash out at someone or we take a wrong decision. We make mistakes while driving. The first thing that needs to be done is take emotions out of it so that our thinking becomes clear and objective. Second is we let them analyze the situation or event that has taken place. For example, the example of COVID and forceful strandedness, which I talked about. If you talk with that person and let him realize what would have happened had we not incarcerated him for 14 days, right? He would have gone home, he would have infected someone else, a child, a 70-year-old grandmother, and they would have landed up with severe illness, which might have led to fatal outcome, right? So when they realize, what the potential consequences might have been, had it not been for this event, it will lead to better acceptance of that particular event or consequence. And the most important thing I told about the example of breakup, you need to be factually correct. Just because he or she is your friend or parent or neighbor or colleague doesn't mean that whatever they are doing is right. When they're wrong, they're wrong. So if you say what is called spade a spade, you might be villain today, but in the long term, you are doing your friend a favor.
So we have a question from the chat box. If perceptions of person to an event is important, so are giving early life lessons to children or teenagers a possible solution?
Yes, madam. In fact, right now, if I remember correctly, school mental health there are counselors in every school, and one of the things which they do is teach children about frustration tolerance, that is ability to accept the word no in simple language. Okay, ability to accept the word no, and there are some important value lessons, like everything will not be to your liking. One complaint which parents made to us a lot of times during this lockdown was children are getting bored. Children are getting bored. So I mean, all of the mental professionals were saying, so what? So they are getting bored. They are not developing cancer. They are not living in apt poverty, right? They're just getting bored. Let them learn how to get over boredom. So this is an important life lesson. So there are many life lessons: frustration tolerance, then delayed gratification. That is to ability to wait for gratification. Just because we want something may not be that you will get that particular thing the next day or within the next hour. So there are some very important mental health related life lessons and life values that need to be taught at school level and at home level as well. And as Dr. Sharma Madam rightly said, yes.
Thank you, sir. Can we please get Dr. Avinash, sir, as well?
Yeah.
So, sir, the next question will be, can we talk about the awareness? Because as for now, there's so much stigma around mental disorders that are existing, like anxiety and depression. People have come to talk about it only now. There is an increasing awareness. So in that situation, how do we destigmatize something like PTED, which is so common, but still so unknown to people?
So I think awareness has to be created. I think even for depression and anxiety, we have very little awareness. So PTED is a long drawn away thing. So I think, the moment we create awareness about it, everyone will start feeling we have PTED, because, everyone experiences anger, hurt, resentment, guilt. So I think we need to start with creating awareness about mental health in general, about building resilience, about building strength. That is something which is very, very important. Now, once we probably do that, then I think it will be easier for us to create awareness about what the disorders are. And I think the focus of all prevention has to be on promoting mental health rather than educating people about different diagnoses and, their symptoms. We have to teach them how to be mentally healthy, and we have to teach them to accept that psychiatrists and psychiatric treatments are not bad. So if, you do need to come and seek help, don't bother about your diagnosis. It's important that you throw that garb of stigma about going to a psychiatrist. That is something which is very, very important. Once you probably do that, then you will be in a better position.
Thanks. Now coming to our last question of the session, I will request both of you to add your points, like on the treatment of PTD in short, like what are the specific treatments, who is eligible to provide treatment, who is eligible to receive the treatment.
I think I've already discussed about the psychotherapeutic management, and that psychiatrists and psychologists generally are more adept to provide treatment. I think Devavrat can add whatever he feels.
So like what is like basic training who can take like of CBT, and can even they provide the treatment?
Devavrat, go ahead. Yeah.
See, in advanced cases where, there is a complete refusal to respond, it will require some patience and some training. But as I said, if it's early detection and if it is someone close to you, then as I said, even a close friend or even a close relative can offer primary intervention, or at least try to intervene, or at least start the process, start the ball rolling. Right, because forget about that perception of the event part. Another important point that needs to be conveyed is that, right, the person makes embitterment, in control of their life. So if you want to help your friend or someone who is facing embitterment, the one thing you can do is convince that person is the way he or she is living right now is under embitterment, which is much more worse than the problem or the event itself. Right. So at least by doing so, you can get the ball rolling, and hope for that the person accepts your suggestion and seeks help. So at least that sort of primary intervention can be done by anyone, even friend, family, or even a colleague.
Yes. So what are the specific treatments for PTED? How do we go about it? Like any other existing mental disorders with the CBT, or aided with with medicines, medications, or any other specific treatments available for PTED?
See, medicines will help only if, all these to affect the vegetative functions. Because, sleep, appetite, for that matter, biological functions. So if you start to affecting that, it will require medication. But otherwise, medicines will not help in PTED, as Avinash sir said in the beginning. So, the treatment to go will be psychotherapy, and which will be the wisdom-based therapy, which sir talked about, is, a variant of CBT. It's like a, custom-made CBT module for this sort of treatment. Whether, you teach the person about how he has seen the event, what would have been, had it been in that place, the perpetrator, or what he should have seen in the event, and so on. So psychotherapy and CBT based therapy like wisdom therapy is the thing to go for embitterment.
Thank you, sir. So I will request now both of you any closing statements if you'd like to give on complete overall PTED, like as we have come to the end of our seminar.
I think the only thing I'll say is it's a disorder which is there, which needs recognition. It is here to stay, and we need to probably, accept it's a condition, and we need to get people to accept it exists and come and seek treatment. Devavrat, you have the final words.
Okay. What I would like to say here is requires help, and most importantly, the best help you can give to someone embitterment is by being brutally honest with that person. As I said, the example which I gave about breakups and COVID treatments. So the best thing to break the ice with embitterment will be not to be goody and supportive sort of thing, but to be honest and be so that it will be the best help to that person, and it will help break the ice of embitterment.
Thank you so much.
Padma.
I'd like to thank both our speakers for gracing this occasion and being so open in answering all the questions.
Hello, Padma. Before you complete with a formal vote of thanks, can I say a few words?
Yes, ma'am. Sure. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, first of all, I'm glad, Dr. Mudgal, that you could sign in today. It was nice to have you with the students. Thank you so much. Dr. Avinash and Dr. Devrat, you all have been simply wonderful today evening. So I just wanted to say a personal word of thanks. Dr. Derek, Dr. Praveen, thank you for staying on for the program again. As yesterday, you all have done it today. Very encouraging. And I want to say a big thank you to the people who are going to give the vote of thanks. And that is Frederick and Padma. I think both of you have done a wonderful job of moderating today. Your preparation is showing, the amount of reading that you all have done is showing, and I think you all deserve a huge round of applause from all of us. Yeah, so well done, proud of you all. And now I'll let you take over with the vote of thanks. Well done, children.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much
to the speakers. Thank you.
On behalf of Students Wing of Bioethics Unit Kolhapur, I would like to thank our Chancellor, Dr. Sanjay Patil, Vice Chancellor, Professor Rakesh Kumar Mudgal, sir, Pro Vice Chancellor, Dr. Shimpa Sharma, ma'am, our Dean, Dr. Rakesh Sharma, sir, he could not be present. We couldn't have Dr. Russell due to time issues, so we are sorry for that. We'd like to give a big thank to our speaker and panelists, Dr. Avinash D'Souza and Dr. Devrat Harshe, for giving us a very good insight on the topic. Thank you, sir. We'd like to thank our Secretary of Bioethics Unit Kolhapur, Dr. Anita Gune, ma'am, our dignitaries, Dr. Derek D'Souza, Dr. Praveen Arora. Thank you, sir. I would also like to thank the Bioethics Steering Committee and Student Advisory Committee members. Last but not the least, a big thank you to all the attendees from India, from abroad, for making this seminar today and yesterday a big success. Thank you to all.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining in.
We have sent you all the feedback forms in the chat box as well as in the WhatsApp groups. You all are kindly requested to please fill it up. Thank you all. It was very good to have you all.
So really, thank you so much, Derek, Praveen. Thank you so much for staying on. I think Avinash and Devrat have a beautiful evening.
Wonderful, wonderful. It's so nice, and that's the whole idea. I think everyone has learned at the end of this session, and it's a wonderful way of transferring information. Everybody enjoys themselves, and yet I don't think any lecture or any classroom teaching could have matched up to the standard. So well done to each and every one. Of course, the moderators were outstanding. I think the preparation you all did shows, and it's good. That is important. It's not just important to look at the technical aspects, but you need to have your knowledge firsthand and up to date. And I think very beautifully you all handled the question. So really good and appreciation. And to all the other students, you can learn from that as well. Shubham, wonderful job as always. And of course, thank you to VC sir. It's always good to have senior faculty like that. It encourages all of us. So good to have you. And thank you, Shimpa ma'am. Always good to be here. Thank you for the invite and for giving us the honor of being here. Thank you.
Thanks, Derek. Bye.
All are kindly requested please to fill up the feedback forms